Hey everyone, James Azar here with the CyberHub Podcast Tech Corner. We are back. It's April. We've taken a few months. We're repurposing our content. We're going to be doing some really cool stuff with Tech Corner this year. So you don't want to miss it. You want to subscribe to the CyberHub Podcast. We're going to have these very cool Friday episodes, but we're also launching a bunch of content in season format. So we'll have season 1, 2, and 3 of Tech Corner launching over the next 18 months. You guys are going to absolutely love it. So you'll want to stay tuned to that. Make sure to subscribe right now if you're watching us on YouTube and turn on the notification bell. If you're listening on your favorite podcast listening platform, please make sure to subscribe right now as well. And make sure to give us a 5-star rating on the reviews. That helps boost us up and keep pushing this content up. For the month of April, we have our CISO Talk Paisley shirt challenge. If you haven't tuned in to our flagship podcast called CISO Talk, please make sure to do so. It's a no sales podcast, 2 practitioners having a conversation about cybersecurity. And I am taking off my iconic black t-shirt for a very ugly Paisley shirt as we go through these rounds. I've reached milestone number 1. So on April 14th, which you'll have to go back and watch the Tech Town Square, I'll be donating a Paisley shirt, but you can still go and donate. The link is going to be below. You're donating to the Wounded Warrior Project, which helps support U.S. military veterans, the brave men and women who don the uniform, who come home with all kinds of injuries, whether it be psychological or physical. The Wounded Warrior Project does God's work in helping these veterans get back into the workforce and into normal life again after their time on the battlefield. So you'll want to go and donate there. Every donation, the smallest one, even a $10 donation, helps support this great cause. Milestone number 1's reached. We're at $1,093 at the time I record this. So I'll be donning the Paisley on the Tech Town Square on April 14th at 8 p.m. For those watching this episode, we're recording this before, but you'll have to go back and watch it and catch the Paisley. And our next milestone is 2,500, where I'll be wearing any Paisley shirt that anyone sends me, or one that I may order myself, although I don't think that's punishment enough. I'll probably order something very stylish for you guys to tune in and watch that. So today I've got a very, very awesome episode. Joining me again, it's going to be Anna Collar. She's the SVP of Content and Evangelist over at KnowBe4. We're going to be talking again about the WhatsApp privacy survey in Africa. So many great things that are going on in the continent of Africa. Anna's going to bring all that to the show today. So you don't want to miss out. Stay tuned. We're getting started right now.
From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast Tech Corner. And now, join me in welcoming your host and CISO, James Azar.
Anna, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, James. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to have you back on. Our first podcast was unbelievable. It was great for so many reasons. But for people who may have not seen our previous podcast, would you mind just giving us a quick run through of your background and how you got started in cyber?
Okay, so we have to go back about 20 years, I suppose. I didn't study IT or anything. I did like a BA in economics, but I did my thesis, or I wrote my thesis together with Siemens on information security back in 2001. And that got me into the whole cybersecurity field, I guess. So it was really coincidence that my side hustle job while I studied, they just paid more than like waitressing, and they had like the option that I could choose information security as one of the subjects, and then I ended up because of that piece of work or that thesis, I was able to start work at a internet service provider, where I was like the interface between the product development team and the business unit, and fast forward many years later, and I've become like a security architect. I did audits, assessments, like the typical kind of security work you do when you work for a service provider. And I always wanted to do my own thing. So about 8 years ago, in fact, when I was married on honeymoon, I drew like a whole storyboard on security awareness stories applicable to non-technical people. And I was lucky enough that one of South Africa's biggest insurance companies, where I was based on site at the time as a security architect, I just showed them the drawings and the idea, and they loved it. And that little side project became a company called Popcorn Training, and we were South Africa's sort of security awareness content publisher. And 3 years ago, so in 2018, we were acquired by KnowBe4. Many of you will know they're sort of the leader in the security awareness space or security culture space. And I was running the Africa subsidiary for KnowBe4 until September last year. And since September, I can focus fully on what I enjoy most, which is content creation, research, and evangelism. So that's it in a nutshell, I guess.
I love your background. I love the diversity of people who get into cybersecurity and how they get started and what they do. It's awesome. So I kind of want to start off today's podcast, and I really want to talk about the WhatsApp privacy change. But I think it's very important to preface, for those who missed our last episode, you and I had a very interesting conversation about how people in Africa use WhatsApp more than they do email.
Yeah.
That it's literally the primary form of communication in all aspects of life on the entire continent.
Pretty much, yeah. I think there may be some regional differences. Like in Kenya, it's very, very, it's like 99% of the population there is on WhatsApp. But yeah, I'd say that the average is probably 90% of all African users are, let's say smartphone users, because you also get a lot of people here that can't afford smartphones and are still on feature phones. But those who can use WhatsApp, and not just the users, businesses as well. Like businesses communicate with the consumers and their customers via WhatsApp. So there's different sort of WhatsApp chatting bots and chat, call it, I don't know, like solutions out there that allow you to communicate with your providers over WhatsApp. So it's quite a prevalent and ingrained application that people use. And I think I shared with you last time that, especially with our Kenyan partners, it's impossible to get hold of them by email. And I just like, you use WhatsApp and then you solve whatever question you have relatively quickly. So it is, whether it's your family or your teammates, your customers, everyone sort of on it.
Yeah, it's very similar to how it is in Israel. So whenever I quit WhatsApp in January with the privacy change. I've deleted the app. I downloaded all my data. I've deleted the app off of every single device I own, and I've actually mined my data because I've downloaded it in JSON.
Okay.
And it's very interesting the kind of data they keep track of. So to me, I know I made the right decision, although I get flack for it every single day, right? People always tell me like, James, I tried to get a hold of you. I sent you a message on WhatsApp. You didn't answer, especially because I do a lot of business overseas, and everyone overseas. I mean, in Israel, businesses will say, don't call me, send me a message in WhatsApp. And people will do like voice memos in WhatsApp to communicate with a business.
Yeah.
And even some government offices in Israel have a WhatsApp line. In fact, the Israeli consulate in Atlanta, Georgia, has a WhatsApp line for Israeli citizens that live here in order to get assistance from counselor 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's not a phone number. It's a WhatsApp text line.
Yeah.
Just text
and
someone.
in South Africa, we've got the government set up something, it's a private I suppose organization, but they work for the government, and they've got something called GovChat, and that allows the government to communicate with the citizens. And obviously during the pandemic, that just exploded because now this technology is based on WhatsApp. So GovChat allowed the government to communicate with the users about grants and sort of those relief funds. which in itself brings a lot of, brought a lot of sort of scam and risks, people trying to scam people for them to pay money that they get their reliefs, etc. But it doesn't surprise me that Israel also does that. I think if I think about the world in sort of different segments, in Europe, Africa, I suppose that in Asia it's more WeChat, and
that's
and
in
they have
China
other,
predominantly.
Yeah.
WeChat is predominantly in China. Most of the rest of Asia doesn't use WeChat. When I went to Korea, they used Signal and WhatsApp. Singapore was predominantly WhatsApp, unless you were communicating with, but they all had WeChat. So to that, because a lot of them do communicate with people within mainland China, they all had WeChat to communicate with people in China. But when they communicated, for example, with me, it was all either through WhatsApp or Signal or Telegram.
Yeah, Telegram is also big here. Signal, obviously now since the big hoo-ha of the privacy notice, which, by the way, if you really look into it, it's wasn't that surprising. But Signal, I think everyone in the tech industry is sort of on it. And I'm also on Signal. But unfortunately, like you say, if everybody else, if your family, if everybody else is still on WhatsApp, it's very difficult to move your whole life off it, even if you want to.
So one thing I've discovered that Signal did is if you delete Signal and then go back and reinstall it now, it imports all your information from WhatsApp to Signal, including the groups and everything. So
really?
Data. Now they did that after the fact. I downloaded all my data. So I got this new device and I downloaded Signal and said, do you want to import all your stuff from WhatsApp?
That's clever.
And I was like, what a brilliant tool. Because one of the biggest challenges of people leaving WhatsApp to go to Signal was the groups, because a lot of people are in a lot of groups and it's very difficult to do that. Let's talk a little bit about that, though. So WhatsApp in December, I believe it was, kind of January, came out with this new privacy notice, new changes to their privacy policies, which essentially entailed, if I summarize this incorrectly, please feel free to correct me, but that they're not reading your messages, but now they're able to look at who you're communicating with, compare that with Facebook, to help advertisers really understand more of your activity in order to improve ads and improve your feed across Facebook, Instagram, and all other Facebook products. Would that be a fair assessment of?
Yeah, pretty much. So what look, ever since Facebook acquired WhatsApp, it's no surprise that they somehow need to monetize, So what they said in that privacy notice is that they are going to share all the metadata with the Facebook company. So that includes obviously Facebook, Instagram, whichever else. And I think in some way what happened is that the media, or the sort of mainstream media, got wind of it on social media, especially down here. We had a lot of activity happening around that, with people misinterpreting what that meant. So people were up in arms saying, oh, Mark Zuckerberg can now read my WhatsApp messages. So that was never implied anyway. So they will still obviously use the encryption of the messages themselves. But what was concerning is that all that data around it, including your contacts, for example, including people that are not on WhatsApp yet. So if I have somebody on my phone that is not on WhatsApp, but it's one of my contacts, and that person may not even be on Facebook at all, but now with this new privacy notice, and that's the other sort of the drawback that they put in there is they gave you like a leave it or take it or leave it option. So they said, well, you either accept that or WhatsApp won't work for you anymore. And because it's so intrinsic here, it just sort of blackmailed everyone into agreeing to the fact that I now have to allow Facebook to get information, including contacts that are on here that actually don't want to be on any of the Facebook products, just merely because they are my contacts or my friends. So I think that is the part that is a bit iffy. the public, however, sort of misinterpreted it a little bit and exaggerated a typical social media style, and all these memes came out and TikTok videos about Mark Zuckerberg now reading our WhatsApp conversations. And in some way, like as a security professional, I thought that was really cool because now it brings the whole privacy conversation or dialogue into the public domain, which is exactly what we need. But at the same time, it's also totally, as it so happens, like the distorted truth, a bit of misinformation there, probably even, maybe even fake information on purpose, who knows. But yeah, so it got a lot of people talking about it, and we then thought it would be interesting to run a survey to find out, okay, what are people really thinking about that? Like we obviously get the trends on social media and we see the articles and all of that, but what are the people on the ground really thinking about it? So we set up a poll or survey across 8 African countries, and we got about 800 people participating. Obviously, all of those are smartphone users, which again is a bit of a, just as a disclaimer, those are not necessarily representative of all the African people, because there are a lot of Africans who are not on smartphones. But the people that participated, they were. And what was interesting there is that in average, so across the 8 countries, only about, I think it was 7% said they would consider moving off WhatsApp. In South Africa, though, it was 15% said that they are seriously considering or have already considered moving off WhatsApp to Signal or Telegram or somewhere else. So that I thought was quite interesting, that South Africans seem to be more concerned than the rest of the countries. And then the other thing that was also interesting that came out of that survey was that, people, sort of a third of them got really concerned, about this new privacy change, and they are concerned about their privacy. 10% sort of said they don't know anything about it, and the rest is sort of, well, yeah, I heard about it, but I don't really care. Like, I'm going to continue using WhatsApp, so what? And then the funniest thing I think I shared with you before was that we then said, okay, well, the people who are concerned, if you're moving off, what are the alternatives? Like, where would you go? And obviously Signal was there, Telegram, Thema, and a few others. But the number one alternative app that was listed there is Facebook Messenger. And, and that obviously, that just again shows that there is, on the one hand side, it's great that the media helps with creating some debate, but there's still so much, I guess, misunderstanding of what privacy really means and what sharing your data means. And in fact, I mean, let's face it, like, we shouldn't be on Facebook or Instagram if we complain about WhatsApp's privacy notices or privacy changes, and yeah, it's just interesting that there's still a lot of education that needs to happen of what it means, what it doesn't mean. That was, just in like the gist of the survey, I guess.
So something very interesting. I do the Goodbye Privacy podcast, and in the first season, in one of my first episodes, I covered the Facebook, Instagram terms and conditions, what we all just hit I agree and move on to. And then I compared the new WhatsApp privacy changes to the privacy policy that exists on Facebook. And all they've done is they've updated the WhatsApp privacy policy to match that of Facebook. The only difference was that they misinterpreted how users view those products. So users view WhatsApp as a way to communicate with one another discreetly, while they view Facebook as being a public-facing platform where they know they're being marketed to, they know they're being solicited, they know they're putting on a show, per se, on social media. And on WhatsApp, people see that more as a privacy thing. And people forget the origins of WhatsApp before Facebook acquired it was at the time, unlimited text messaging was not a thing anywhere in the world. And so, but WhatsApp would allow you to do all the messaging you wanted, and it took very little bandwidth, meaning, if you weren't sending pictures and videos, on your data plan and you were just texting, you could do hundreds of thousands of texts and never even reach the peak of your data plan, which was significant for communication because it reduced the charges on your phone, right? And that brought some very interesting points of view to how they miscalculated this, because on Facebook constantly will tell you, do you want to invite this friend who's not on Facebook to join Facebook? And they know you're their friend because of your contacts if you have Facebook on your device.
Yeah.
It's that piece of misinformation to me is extremely fascinating. When you look at the behavior now, where 3 months out, they said that they were going to postpone the privacy changes until May, although they've already enacted some of them with some version updates, right? So with some of the version updates they've done since, they've added one clause of the privacy they tried to pass through. And that's what I kind of said when this came through. And then everyone said, well, they withdrew it, James. They withdrew it. They're not going to do it. And I was like, no.
They won't.
No. They're just going to do it, but they're going to do it in smaller bits and pieces so you don't pay attention to it. It's not going to be one big massive thing. I go, and maybe it'll push back their timeline by a month or two. But they'll come up with a bunch of version updates that do nothing but maybe improve two things. But meanwhile, when you agree to the version update, you're agreeing to the new terms and conditions, and that's how they get you. And that's been true thus far.
And I think you really hit the nail on its head with the perception. And in some way, to their defense, that privacy policy was actually, it was really transparent. So they were quite good about it, but they put, I think they were probably, it's too much at once. And with that whole take it or leave it approach, it was quite, it was like too much of a shocker. And people are not seeing WhatsApp as a social media tool. They're seeing it as a communications tool. They're using it for work. They're using it for, like you said, for kind of private conversations. And that perception of people and their behavior of how they use these tools has so much to do with how they consider, even though it's the same data in a way, and it's all linked anyway. But it's interesting if you bring that in, the whole perception of people.
It's absolutely fascinating. I think what's interesting to me in Africa, the awareness towards privacy has really shifted since the last time you and I spoke. There's been a lot more awareness of the sophisticated African consumer to their privacy rights and to who's keeping track of their data. Have you seen that be the case? And what are some of the trends that are really going on right now when it comes to awareness towards privacy or security in general in Africa?
So, maybe let me start with South Africa. It's all, it's all very regional, but
Right.
In South Africa, we've been talking about like our local data privacy or data protection law for the last 13 years. It's in the making. That's how long it's been discussed. And it's only really, it has been enacted last year, and our companies had 1 year to sort of comply with it. And from May this year, it will, if you don't comply with it, and if there's a complaint, the regulator can enforce fines, etc. I think the awareness on the consumer level has probably in some way got something to do with, the press, again, talking more about this piece of legislation, and it's being put more in the mainstream media. But I think what helped more were sort of quite big names that had data breaches that we had locally, like a big insurance company. We had, look, there's not a week that goes by where there's not a data breach. We had our credit bureau that leaked personal information of 24 million South Africans. That includes like your bond payments and whether you're defaulting and your address and all of that. So that is quite scary, because obviously that kind of information can be used for identity theft and all sorts of nefarious purposes. And I think those kind of stories have brought out more awareness than maybe the legislation or the status of legislation across the continent. So South Africa, we do have that that it's called POPIA, or Protection of Personal Information Act. I think it's a good piece of legislation. It was based, because it's been so long in the making, it was based on the previous, like the EU Data Protection Act, so before the GDPR one. But it's about 80%. If you comply with POPIA, you're sort of 80% there, in terms of GDPR. So it's very much European-centric focused. And then there's a push across the continent that's been driven by the African Union. They've got a subgroup called the African Union Cybersecurity Expert Group, and they created also actually a really good piece of document or framework called the Malabo Convention. It's the African Union Data Protection and Cybersecurity Framework, and there's a big drive to get all the 53 countries to ratify that piece of legislative framework. I guess it's the best term for it. And in some way, it would be good if we could get more countries to do that, because then rather than having a South African law and a Kenyan law and all these different laws, we would have something like the EU has done, which is one GDPR framework that applies to everybody. So yeah, there's a drive to do that. Unfortunately, so far I think it's only 14 countries that have adopted it, but at least there are things happening, but we're still quite behind the rest of Europe or the rest of the world.
I mean, so the idea of comparing where each place stands, I think it's a false premise, right? So when you say like we're behind Europe or the States, I go, but are you really? Because like you said, very few of the population in Africa have smartphones. Most people still use flip phones for communication, especially those that live below the poverty line, right? And even, I think people need to understand that Africa doesn't really have a middle class. It's got a ruling class, and it's got everyone else that's pretty much low class. And it's South Africa might be the difference, because South Africa has a middle class. But I think the rest of the continent doesn't much have a middle class.
It's growing though. So there's actually such an amazing book called Factfulness by his name is Hans Rose or something. Sorry, I forgot the name, but it's a Swedish.
I'll look it up. Go ahead.
Yeah, and he says that that unfortunately that is sort of the perception that we all have of Africa is that there's the super rich and then the very poor, but it is, and the very poor still do exist, and 40% of them of the population in Africa, they don't have access to basic infrastructure, and that's obviously a number that is way too high. But there are a lot of different levels. So he in this book he talks about level 1 to level 5, and a level 1 would be you really at the lowest poverty line, so you can't even afford a bicycle, or you have to walk somewhere to get your water out of a well, kind of thing. And then a level 2 would be, hey, I can at least afford some shoes and a bicycle. And a level 3 is I can get a little scooter. And so that we talk about these different levels that maybe for a let's call it a typical American or typical European, they think of that still as very poor. But as soon as you have the ability to afford a fridge and a phone subscription and internet and whatever, you become a de facto a consumer that can participate in the economy somewhat. So you're no longer just like a poor person and a rich person. So there's all these different levels, and it's really interesting to look at it that way, because then you have areas, not maybe necessarily countries, but areas like urban areas that are very much the same as they are in the rest of the world, where you have a big middle class, a growing middle class, and people that live in houses that have everything that you that we deem normal in Europe or in the States. Quite a big growing middle class, and not just in South Africa. That's in a lot of, they call it the big I think the big 15, which are sort of these centers of wealth in in the different African areas. So it's not as dark and bad as the rest of the world thinks. And there's a lot of opportunity too, because if you think about it, and I always love using that, like the average age in Africa is 19 years old. It's the youngest continent, it's the youngest population. And those youngsters, they do grow up with phones, with access to the internet and opportunities that allows them, even if they do come from the worst infrastructure areas, but it gives them opportunities that maybe their parents didn't have. And there is a growth opportunity on the continent. And companies see that. So there's much more investment now into Africa. I mean, we had, what are those? It's a payment service for Stripe. They just invested $200 million in a Nigerian payment gateway provider. That was the beginning of the year. Last year, there was another massive acquisition in Nigeria by I think some other American payment gateway provider. So especially in the FinTech market, there's so much happening because you have all these consumers that are maybe, some of them are not very rich consumers, but they're consumers nonetheless, and they buy stuff online, and they pay online. So the whole FinTech and mobile market is big here.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching a bunch of documentaries around Ghana and how they built an e-commerce system that was based on a phone call. So you would call an order and then someone would get on a scooter and deliver the product directly to you. And this was, we're talking 7-8 years ago. And it was all done through, and it was the idea was how cell phones have changed the way Ghana, which was at the time Africa's second largest economy, was dealing with the telecom changes that are going on there. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I didn't mean to come off in a way where I think most of Africa doesn't have a middle class. The middle class is growing in Africa, that's for sure. And the name of the book is Factfulness by Hans Rosling. And
there we go,
yes. I will put the link to it in the podcast description for those who want to go get it. From Amazon or any other bookstore of your choice. You should definitely give it a read. It seems very interesting. I was reading the synopsis as you were speaking about it, and it's more of how we view the world. And I think there are a lot of things that are true and untrue when it comes to how people view the planet. I think we know that Africa is has the largest opportunity to grow over the next several decades as a continent, because we've seen the Asian continent now reach, I think, its peak. And we're going to see those investments now start to shift towards Africa. And Africa is now at the doorstep of welcoming this type of growth. And we're definitely going to see a lot of growth. But the idea of the African consumers' view on privacy and that attention to privacy, I don't want to say is interesting, but I think Africans in general have always been very, very private people, right? The tribes have always been very private. The things of, historically, Africa has been I don't want to say a private continent, but the regions are very, very private. There are parts of Africa that until today remain somewhat of a mystery for some people, where you can't really infiltrate those areas.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean that also plays out then and it's quite challenging, to be honest, because there is that culture which you'd think, well, that's maybe a good thing, but it then translates into government making decisions such as, you cannot companies are not allowed to host any of their data outside of the country. And now you can't have an Amazon data center in every single African country. It's just not feasible, right? But it's really difficult to then speak to someone in Rwanda, for example, and say, look, it does make sense to, in our case, like KnowBe4, we do security awareness training. So we don't even take a lot of confidential data. Like all we need is really the customer's email address, and for African customers we use like Amazon in Ireland, so it is sort of already in the European zone. It's not in the States, and yet there are some organizations in Africa that feel that's not good enough because of the local data privacy regulations being so strict about having to host in country. And in fact, also South Africa, they just brought out it's still in draft format, like a new policy on data and cloud. And there's, and I've actually just posted something on LinkedIn like 5 minutes before our call about when I read that, they kind of proposing that we should have our own cloud infrastructure to host our own data that should be built on open source technology. Fair enough, but the government can't even currently there's no budget or resources in place to fulfill what they should be doing already in terms of the cybersecurity hub, the kind of standard sort of IT services that they should offer to the government institutions themselves. That's all it's not great quality. So then they're proposing that they want to find people that have the skills and pay these people and keep them on to build a Amazon equivalent. That's the South African national cloud data center that can compete with the Amazons and the Microsoft. So I just find that very concerning.
By the way, I think that's a brilliant initiative. I think that's a brilliant initiative
for them to compete.
Yes, I absolutely do. And you know why? Because you can't trust these companies. So big tech has gotten so big that you can't really, as a country I think if you went to most people today and you took them back 10 years and you said, what if you could have all this, but it's controlled by private companies who get to decide what to do with whatever you want? Would you accept that? And people would be like, not really. But if you had a national data center of sorts that was competing with the Amazons, that was competing with the Azures, that was competing with Google Cloud, right?
Yeah.
That was providing a sense of security and patriotic ownership of it, I think some people would be willing to pay a little bit more of a premium to go to something like this. We see that today here in the States. I mean, the idea of a national economy. So in 2020, in Amazon, the most searched word would any product was made in USA. So it wasn't, I want to buy a bottle of water. It was, I want to buy a bottle of water that's made in the USA. I don't want to buy something that's made somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting concept, I think, that's really in trend with where things go today. Right. And without getting overly, we're not going to go down the political route, but I think from a national security route, it's also very good for the government to have that, to build it out with the top talent and pay top dollar for it, because over the long term, they're not relying on any foreign corporation or any foreign nation for their information. They kind of are able to keep an independent structure and infrastructure in place.
And I think that's what they're going for, is that whole, fourth industrial revolution, and they want to have a say over the data, or at least be able to get some tax returns on the data or the money that's being made with the data. But the thing is that, maybe in principle it's a good idea, but I know just from working with the government how badly resourced they are already, and how badly resourced the country is. Like, even in the industry that is able to afford top dollars, the government can't afford to pay top dollars. So I'm just a little bit cynical about the reality of getting that to work. And then even if they do get it to work, the longevity and the security, and I don't know, I would not feel comfortable putting right now, if I had to put my data in some national South African data center, I'd rather put it at Amazon. Despite all the privacy.
So that's a very interesting point, and I think that's the beauty of looking at a continent like Africa that is growing very rapidly. but it's looking at the rest of the world that's grown, and it's looking out up north to Europe, and it's going like, what have they done here? And what are some of the challenges they're experiencing? They're looking at America, they're looking at Asia and China, right? And they're looking at all these different things, and they're going, all right, what do we need to do to not go through some of the hardships or some of the challenges that are going on in these countries that are slowing them down not theoretically, but practically, so that we can really excel and grow rapidly. And when you think of the fact that maybe the government doesn't have the money, right? But government rarely finances this kind of stuff. They typically offer tax credits. They find a bunch of entrepreneurs and people with wealth who are willing to invest in to build something like this, where they stand to make a profit, and then the government stands to make the back end tax on it 5-10 years down the road, right? And as much as there is, I want to say, corruption and challenges in different parts of the world, there's also a sense of national responsibility. And what the internet has done is it's built transparency, because what we started talking about today with the WhatsApp privacy change was the idea of people having control and having a say over something.
Yeah.
And WhatsApp saw a drop of, I think, over 100 and some odd million users in January. Now they've gotten some back, because some people kind of deleted the app on principle and waited a few weeks and then went back to it. Some people like me have not downloaded the app again. And I did a whole show on the fact that I quit Twitter and I quit WhatsApp, and I'm a very happy human being.
Oh, yeah? I didn't know you quit Twitter as well.
I did. The only Twitter page I have is the podcast Twitter page at CyberHub Podcast, and it's all automated posts. I do zero engagements. I don't go on Twitter. I don't go scrolling through the black hole of hell. I refuse to do that. If there was one company I'd love to see die in the tech overreach, it'd be Twitter. I think Twitter is bad for mankind. I think Twitter has created has brought out the ugliness of humans and has divided people.
No, I agree. There's something that brings out the worst. I mean, there's some theory that even with, Elon Musk and even, with Trump, that Twitter actually fed into this, because it's so addictive, and it feeds into these kind of personalities and makes them worse than they may be, like in terms of the stuff that it gets you to post. Anyway, that's I'm not a huge Twitter fan myself, so
I mean, I like the idea of localization, right? I'm a firm believer in the idea of localization. And as we talk about localization, let's talk a little bit about the talent in the continent of Africa, right? You talked about the national kind of like data center, and you said, well, but we don't always really have that talent available, right? What are some of the ways we can start addressing that talent gap in Africa? We spoke about several initiatives last time you and I did a show, but what are some of the other things that could be done to really bridge that awareness and bring through more people to get involved in cyber?
Yeah, so I mean, look, it's not a simple answer, I guess, but it's one that I always say you can't expect one side to solve it. We can't expect the government to solve it by themselves or the industry, so we really have to work together. And I think there's more and more of these pockets of initiatives that are happening where private sector is working, like we're doing. The GovX initiative is still ongoing. We now have by the way, we've got our 10 qualifying teams now busy going through the mentoring phase, where you have private companies coming together, sponsoring a hackathon type or innovation challenge for students to come up with security-related solutions for the government. So it's really bringing in public, private sector, and the students together in one way, maybe finding innovative solutions, but the main objective of the whole thing is to get students to be inspired and interested in joining the cybersecurity industry and getting them together with mentors and industry professionals and sort of creating that, in a way, like informal network already. And there are other, there are other initiatives like that. Like even our local banks have started up security academies, just again out of desperation because they can't find the people. And then Google is working. I think it's Google working with our local provincial government to do. To provide like sort of a cybersecurity curriculum for the schools. And that's something I think I may have mentioned in the last podcast, is that we did another survey across 445 teachers together with the African Forum on Cyber Defense. And only 3.7% of the respondents said that their schools are currently covering cybersecurity at all. And that includes, sort of high schools as well as tertiary institutions. So not enough is being offered or done yet to educate or offer the education to the people. And like I always say that in all my sort of, when I talk to the press, it's always, security is no longer a tech skill, it's a life skill. So we should really be starting that from way down, kindergarten level, bring in some sort of critical thinking skills, and then sort of offer cybersecurity base level awareness at least to all the students. And then also, as like they offer coding courses or whatever, have like a cybersecurity course, at high school level, and then to university students as well. So unfortunately, at the moment, there's not enough in place yet, but there is a trend that we're seeing more of these kind of pocket initiatives coming up. And hopefully that's, I think I said that before, is like, it doesn't help complaining about it. You have to do something about it. So we're getting involved with a few of those initiatives like the GovX, and hopefully there'll be more of that in the future.
Yeah, that's a lot of the initiatives that are going on in Africa around cyber right now are very very inspiring, but they need a lot more support, right? They need more instructors, they need more companies that are willing to do it. And one very interesting thing I'd like to bring up for this is companies that are looking for interns, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things we do with our internship program is I want to hire interns from all kinds of different parts and bits. And pre-COVID, that was very much harder to do because we wanted interns per se. One of the requirements was that they had to be in the office. But now that no one's in the office, I can hire interns from anywhere in the world. So our latest intern class represents 4 different countries.
That's awesome.
So, and one of which is from North Africa. One of our interns is from North Africa. And so from Morocco. So I think there's that concept of, now that we're getting used to the idea of working remote and we're polishing all of our programs, should allow us to reach outside of our typical borders and team up with someone like you, Anna, and say, hey, Anna, we want to bring 3 interns into our environment. All we care about is attitude. We'll teach them the skills, but they're going to have to work on the hours that their mentors, the people that the teams are going to be on, are going to be doing it with. And I think that's really important and critical.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and that's the beauty of COVID, is to allow that kind of flexibility. I mean, we also have, as part of the GovX initiative, one of the call it the spot prizes, is internship programs, and it is for companies that are not necessarily in South Africa. It's sort of a remote. I mean, it's like some software development company that does some work for a European company. So it's nice to have that opportunity, and I think it's the best way of learning. I remember when I was a student doing internships, that's what set me up to pursue this career. And like I only got I forgot to mention it early on, but I only got my Siemens student job because I did an internship at Deutsche Telekom in Asia, actually. And that was amazing, So because of the internship, which obviously wasn't paid very well, but you gain the experience, and then it sets you up for later success. So I think that's brilliant. And if you have another spot available, we'd love to I don't know.
We do 6-month cohorts for internships.
Okay.
So we bring in a team every February and September, essentially. So we open it up in July. People apply. We interview in August. They start September. They get a 2-week training period from the other interns. So they get partnered with one intern who kind of helps them with a mentor, get adjusted into what they're going into. And then the old interns either get a job on with us if we have an opening and they fit it, or if not, they get a letter of recommendation. It's obviously a paid internship. So I don't believe in free labor. I don't believe in such a thing as free labor. I think that if someone's doing work, even if they're learning, you can pay them a decent wage to at least allow them in that period of time. And if they're not good, then, you don't keep them. But, it's different parts of the world. Wages are very different. I mean, in India, for an intern doesn't cost a lot of money a week. Whereas in the States, an intern will cost us a lot more. And so we take those under consideration as well. But yeah, we're going to open our next cohort in 3 months, in July, to start applying. I'll post it on my LinkedIn page when we're doing that. And
awesome.
We interview for about a month. And we don't do what we've decided to do for the next cohort is we will not take written CVs. We'll only take video applications. And we've built a committee of 3 people that go through every single video application, up to a minute video, of why we should pick you for an internship and your background and so forth. And
that's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's we want to adjust to the world in general. And one of the things that we also understand is that I understand is ATS systems and general CVs don't always make it to the top of the list. But attitude comes off in a video.
That's true.
And when I'm hiring interns, I'm not hiring for experience. I'm not hiring for university. I'm hiring attitude. I'm hiring someone who's a doer, right? A motivator, a team player. And so I can't get that from a piece of paper.
Yeah, 100%. And
So change the world to video. Everyone's on TikTok already. Everyone's on Instagram. Everyone's on Snapchat.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it might be a bit challenging, but it's a skill that youngsters I suppose it's one of those life skills you have to learn. It's if you're let's say you're very introverted and shy and not natural in front of the camera, but that's just something you have to learn to overcome. But like I shared this with you before we hit the recording button, but in my previous role at a big local integrator, we ran a security engineering team, and there we only ever hired for attitude because we just couldn't find the skills. And you get the people in and obviously you do some sort of exercises or questions, and then you rate them based on it, exactly like you said. What's the energy they give you, how do they approach a problem, like how would they go about researching it, how do they react to also being, I mean, in that scenario that we had sometimes 3-4 people talking to them, which could be intimidating, but then you see how the person reacts. So attitude is everything, especially in security.
Yeah, I agree. We're almost out of time. Anna, any last words for our awesome audience today?
I guess thanks again for taking the time, and if you, I know we mentioned the Factfulness book, but it's really worth the read. It will make you feel much better about the world, including Africa. So you know, do yourself a favor and have a look at it, or look up his TED Talks. He takes data and makes it really cool to change some of the perceptions we have about the world. And yeah, I think it just leaves a positive note to everything.
It is. It absolutely is. I love having you on the show, and you've always got an open invite whenever you got something cool that's going on in Africa to let us know and come on. You know what? I'd love
Thanks,
to be able
James.
to deal with you, and I'm kind of throwing this out here at the end of the show. But it'd be great to get a few, to do a live show, a LinkedIn Live with some people from your team in Africa, and kind of talk a little bit about, you know, the existing challenges, the support that's needed, kind of like the global approach to solving some of the critical challenges, and doing it live with our live audience so that there can be an interaction between you and maybe another person and some of the people who listen to this who would be very interested in really being part of some of the stuff that's going on in Africa. I think that
would be awesome.
I think there's a lot of stuff that's happening and that's going on right now that, thanks to COVID, right? We've all learned to be more community minded on a global level, I think more than ever before. Where we saw Africa maybe as a vacation destination to go to a safari, I see Africa as a business hub and a place where there's unlimited growth. There's really no ceiling in place if you're able to really do stuff well in the continent of Africa.
Yeah, I agree. I would love that, James. And I can also get some, you know, people from all over the continent. Like there's some brilliant women leaders in that I'm in touch with.
Let's do it. Let's start an email chain. Let's plan on doing something. I will be in your time zone for the month of May and June. So it would be great. We can do something within that time zone period, and it'll be awesome to do something really, really fun. And just really highlight this, I think, for people to see what amazing talent exists in Africa, and as people look to expand, and that they also look at Africa as a possible destination.
Awesome. I'll get on it. How many people do you think we need?
As many as you can bring on. We can have up to 10 people in a live stream.
Okay.
Now, over an hour, it'll be hard to get 10 people to speak anything of value. So I'd say it'd be good. We can do like 2 or 3 more people, and really focus the conversation.
Awesome.
It'd be a blast.
Yeah,
to do that.
I think so too. That'll be awesome.
It'll be awesome.
Thanks, James.
My pleasure. I love what you're doing over there, and I love, I have a special connection with the continent of Africa. I've spent some time there, and I have a lot of really good friends from, that part of the world, and it's I've never been met with so much hospitality like I have being in the continent of Africa. I mean, it's just everywhere I went, it's just nothing but love. So
yeah,
you
come back. Come back soon.
I want to come back. I'm waiting for COVID I get my second vaccine in a few weeks, and then I'll be good to go. And I can start traveling again and doing events and all that good stuff. And I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, I can't wait either. We don't know when we get our vaccines yet, but
well, I think the challenge with South Africa from a vaccine perspective is none of the current vaccines are able to deal with the South African mutation of COVID effectively. In fact, if you're not vaccinated, you're better off than if you are vaccinated, according to a report that came out yesterday from the University of Tel Aviv and Pfizer. That said that people who were vaccinated and were infected with the South African variety of COVID actually had worse symptoms than people who were not vaccinated.
That's just terrible for our tourism industry. Oh my God, I don't even want to hear stories like that. Oh God.
Well, I mean, I will say this though. Everything is starting to open up. The science has now proven that if you're locked down, it's worse for your population than if everything is open. Right? And so as long as people experience and practice safety, meaning wear your masks, still social distance, but don't lock people at home. That's actually worse. In California and New York had a worse mortality rates than Georgia, Florida, and Texas, and they were all open.
Yeah. No, it's
And California and New York were in lockdown. So, I mean, there's some now research that's starting to come out that says lockdowns are bad. Like, don't lock people down, but allow people to go out, but keep limitations, right? I mean, don't let, if your population isn't vaccinated, get the herd immunity out of the way. Keep your elderly protected. Keep the people with pre-existing conditions protected.
Yeah, the Sweden model. Yeah,
and go forth and live life, because it's definitely something to be done. But I'm very excited. We have our first event in two weeks, our first in-person event here in Georgia, and so I'm very excited about that. I'll be emceeing that event, and
cool.
And so I'm excited about that event, and we'll have several more events coming up in May, June, and in July. I'll be doing my first. I'll be doing 2 events that I'll actually be getting on an airplane to go to. One in awesome Grand Rapids, and another one in beautiful Las Vegas. And I can't wait, because Black Hat is in person. Black Hat is in person. Yay!
It's so odd. Like I did one in-person event, I think, late last year before we had our second wave lockdown, and it felt so odd not wearing yoga pants, like actually having to wear some proper shoes and not just like you look nice up to here and then who cares about what shoes you wear
under my black shirt. It's like sweatpants and Crocs, right? Or shorts and Crocs. That's life, right? For a lot of us. I'll tell you, I did my first. I'm doing my first in-person event, so I went and put on my suit to see. Well, did I get the COVID pounds or did I not? I got the COVID pounds. I'm on a diet right now. I haven't touched carbs or sugar in like a week and a half. I'm down 5 pounds. Like,
and the mood, how's the mood level?
The first few days were hard. I'm now a little bit better. Obviously, getting the vaccine had a little bit of had a little bit of an impact as well.
Yeah.
So I can't complain.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Awesome. Well, Anna, folks, Anna Collard of KnowBe4. Go check out KnowBe4 and all the awesome things they are doing. They really are world leaders when it comes to security culture. And I think KnowBe4 Con is this week.
It is. Oh, next week. Yeah.
Next week. Yeah, next week. KnowBe4 Con. If you're a KnowBe4 customer, go check it out. And if you're not, ping me. We'll get you a pass to KnowBe4 Con. You don't want to miss it. It's awesome.
We have some great speakers.
Yeah, I saw some of the stuff and I was like, oh, this is so exciting. It's awesome. So I love it. That's it for us here, folks. Tech Corner. We'll be back with more next week. We've got the State of the Vendor Security Report coming next week with Nick Wistik and Patrick Benoit, the BISA over at CBRE. So you don't want to miss it. We'll have part 1 here on Tech Corner, part 2 on CISO Talk. You won't want to miss both. So until then, folks, thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for tuning in. And most importantly, practice social distancing and stay cyber safe.
Make sure to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. And get all the latest information at cyberhubpodcast.com.